Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. I am Sabine Bernabè, Vice President and Director General of the Independent Evaluation Group here at the World Bank. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome back to those of you who attended yesterday's excellent session on how evaluation is adapting to a changing global context. So today, we're going to focus on the evolution of the evaluation practice itself, and the rather existential question on whether we're heading towards a professionalization or a cluster of diverse practices. This important discussion will be moderated by Jos Vassen, who is an advisor here in IG. But before I hand over to Jos, it is my privilege to announce the winner of the Young and Emerging Evaluators essay competition. Young and Emerging Evaluators are, of course, the future of our practice. And together with the Global Evaluation Initiative and the International Program for Development Evaluation Training, IG is committed to supporting the new generation of young and emerging evaluators globally. Building the capacity of a new generation of local evaluators is central to the evaluation ecosystem and to closing the gap in evaluation capacity worldwide. But more importantly, this is also how diverse voices enter the evaluation practice. We were certain that the young and emerging evaluators would have innovative ideas on the theme of culturally responsive evaluation and its aim of closing the gap between local and global knowledge, and we were proved right. There were 29 essay submissions from all regions of the world, and I want to take this opportunity to really thank each of the 43 individuals that submitted essays for the competition. We really acknowledge and appreciate all their efforts. I have to say that they did present a real challenge for our judges, and because of the high quality of the submission, it was quite difficult to identify the winning essay. And I would like to thank each of our judges for their careful and rigorous review of each submission and for reaching a consensus on the winner. And our judges were Wala Ayasra, Mercy Finanzo, Gabriela Renteria Flores, and Rai Sengupta. Thank you very much. Let me also thank our partners with whom we designed the competition, the Global Evaluation Initiative, Eval Youth, and Better Evaluation. And now, if I have built up sufficient anticipation, I'd like to announce the winners and runners-up of the competition. So in third place, we have Arati Joshi and Dharmendra Kalauni with an essay on the roles emerging evaluators can play in the advancement of culturally responsive evaluation. In second place, Asheadzi Yusuf Wasuku and Sember Ishu, with an essay on explorations of the challenges and opportunities of integrating culturally responsive evaluations into evaluation practice. And finally, by unanimous consent of the judges, the winner of the Young and Emerging Evaluators competition is a joint submission by Eni Flora Gazzi, Rumbitsa Tizora, and Joyce Muyengwa, with their essay on Reflections on Meeting the Challenges of Communicating the Validity of Culturally Responsible Evaluation and Getting Influential Voices and Change Makers to Listen. So my warmest congratulations to Eni, Rumbitsa, and Joyce. I very much look forward to hearing your presentation. And one last thank you goes to the World Bank Group office in Harare that helped us by providing the facilities for the winners to participate in today's event. So without further ado, I will hand over to Jos, who will be moderating the session this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, esteemed colleagues. We are all very much looking forward to the presentation of the winning essay. So without further ado, let me give the floor to our winners.
Thank you very much, Joseph. My name is Rumbitsa Tizora, and I am a research and evaluation specialist at the UNICEF Zimbabwe country office. I'm really excited to be part of the team that has won this YEE competition. As you can see from the screen, in our winning essay, we wanted to contribute to the ongoing dialogue surrounding the evolution of evaluation methodologies by exploring the intricacies of communicating the validity of culturally responsive evaluation to influential voices and change makers. I'm sure that most of you here will agree with me that CRE is met with a lot of skepticism and resistance within the established evaluation frameworks. Our presentation today is going to highlight some of the characteristics of CRE, its importance, as well as the challenges and strategies that we face in communicating the validity of CRE. So what is CRE? CRE is a technique that acknowledges the role of culture in the work that we do as evaluators. It highlights the importance of cultural diversity, subjectivity, inclusivity, and equity in evaluation practice. It also highlights that culture affects how people perceive and interpret information, how they communicate and interact with each other. It emphasizes the need for culturally sensitive interaction with our communities to ensure relevant and beneficial evaluations. It also recognizes that evaluations are not neutral, and they may perpetuate power imbalances if conducted without cultural sensitivity. With all these complexities, how then, as evaluators, do we promote CRE in the work that we do? Firstly, education and awareness is critical to dismantle the preconceived notions and fostering a collective understanding of the necessity of cultural responsiveness in evaluation practice. It is also important to note that CRE draws on and extends concepts of previous evaluation methodologies that are already in existence and that we are familiar with. It's important for us to highlight the success stories and the case studies that illustrate the tangible benefits of embracing cultural responsive evaluations in our practices. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Joyce, who's going to take us through the importance of CRE as well as some of the challenges that we face in CRE. Thank you very much. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you, Rumbiza. My name is Joyce. I'm going to take you through the importance and challenges of cultural responsive evaluation. So I have 6 points I want to illustrate and explain further. The first point of importance is evaluations are done in a culturally sensitive manner. This basically we are saying the process respect all the and acknowledge the cultural beliefs and cultural values and practices of individuals and communities which are being evaluated. The second point is it promotes equity and social justice. Here, CRE approach acknowledges and addresses the systematic inequalities which can be found in the communities and power imbalances to make sure that the evaluation process goes smoothly. And the third point, the evaluation ensures validity and reliability. This simply means that by conducting these evaluations, we are going to produce the data that is accurate and credible, and the results which will be respecting the cultural diversity of the communities to be served. The fourth point of the importance is fostering community engagement partnership. When doing these evaluations, there are different stakeholders involved. So it means these evaluations stakeholders come together and make sure that every point is taken from all members and ensures that there is the needs and the priorities of the communities are met. Now move to the fifth point. It addresses biases and stereotypes. By using CRE approach, the challenges and all the assumptions and the prejudices are going to be addressed in this to make sure that the evaluation processes and outcomes are correct. Then we move on to the final 6th point of the importance, which is it meets the funding requirements. Usually many funders nowadays, they are into cultural responsive evaluation. So the standards and the basic guidelines of the funders and all the regulatory bodies are going to be met, and making sure that they're incorporating cultural responsiveness. Now I'll move on to the challenges. I'm going to talk about the following 4 challenges in the communication of the validity of CRE. The first challenge is diverse stakeholder perspective. When the stakeholders are many, it means there can be a challenge in a way, the power imbalances and different priorities, different knowledge, coming together, which can bring many conflicts in the process of evaluation. The second point is limited understanding, sorry, it's not showing. It's limited understanding of cultural concepts. Here, the evaluator sometimes can have limited cultural concept of the areas they're going to evaluate. Or this can be, you don't know about the areas, you don't know about the norms and the values of those communities you're going to evaluate. So it can be difficult. For example, when you go to the villages, there are some villages if you want to meet the head of the village or the chief of the village, you can bring a goat, a sheep, or some token of appreciation. And sometimes maybe the way of the dressing when you go to those areas which are lagging behind, these are some of the cultural practices which evaluators should know, and it's challenging if you don't know those areas. Now move to the 3rd point, which is the complexity of cultural dynamics. Here we're talking of the complex of the cultural concept itself. It is multifaceted. There are difference in histories, in religious beliefs, in political and social context, and even in the patriarch system. Because if we look here in Africa, like, for example, in Zimbabwe, the patriarch system is still strong, and you cannot go to those areas and maybe ask to speak with women, even though there is gender and mainstreaming and gender equality, which movement going on, but there are some areas which are still lagging behind. Then the 4th challenge we have in the CRE is language communication. This is a basic challenge with all evaluations or with all data collection system. They can be challenged in interpretation of the words or the way the way you can interpret it in the language barriers, which can hinder the proper collection of data. Now I can move on and give my colleague Anne to give us the strategies and mitigations of some of these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. So Joyce have walked us through the challenges in communicating the validity of CRE. So what are the ways that we can use to communicate, which could be the strategies to communicating the validity of CRE? So I'm going to discuss this 5 points, which will help us in trying to mitigate or resolve these challenges. So the first point is develop clear definitions. So clearly defining the concepts and principles of CRE is crucial in communicating its validity. This involves describing what it means to be culturally responsive, how it is incorporated into the evaluation practices, and the intended impact on the evaluation process and outcomes. So by firstly defining the definitions, we are actually starting to clarify things and even addressing some of the challenges that Joyce just discussed. Then the second point is to engage with stakeholders. So actively involving stakeholders from culturally diverse communities being evaluated is essential for demonstrating the capacity of CRE. The input, perspectives, and experiences can help validate the approach and ensure that it is aligned with the needs and values of the community. So this point actually addresses
all of the strategies, all of the challenges that Joy just discussed. Then the third point is to provide evidence. So presenting empirical evidence and case studies that demonstrate the effectiveness and impact of CRE can help communicate its validity. This can include outcomes, success stories, and research findings that support the approach. Making use of these empirical evidence documents is actually helpful because it then gives the voice of stakeholders to the people that are supposed to get the information about the evaluation. Number 4, we need to build capacity. Communicating the capacity of CRE, communicating the validity of CRE includes showing how it builds evaluation capacity among stakeholders. This involves highlighting how the approach enhances cultural competence, promotes inclusion, and supports the development of skills and knowledge of culturally responsive practices. So this approach actually helps with the evaluators understanding such issues as the cultural concepts and the dynamics, the different dynamics in the communities. Then the 5th point is to collaborate. So collaboration with experts, organizations, and practitioners with experiences in CRE can strengthen its validity. By working with those who successfully applied the approach and sharing their experiences can help validate the effectiveness and relevance of CRE. So when we do evaluations, we need to document our lessons. This helps in the upcoming evaluations that will come. And these collaborations are important because it's not every time that you get to experience everything that is on the ground when it comes to evaluation. So it is important to underscore that in all these aspects of communicating strategies, the critical common element is involvement of stakeholders. So in conclusion, a clear approach is critical for understanding and assessing the impact of programs and interventions within diverse communities. By valuing the perspectives and experiences of different cultural groups, we can ensure that our evaluations are inclusive, equitable, and relevant. By implementing CRE methods, we can create positive change and improve outcomes for all individuals and communities. So the main takeaway point that I can give to every one of us is that we need to commit to adapting culturally responsive evaluation practices and working towards a more equitable and inclusive society for all. Thank you all for your time. Joseph, over to you.
Thank you very much, Annie and Joyce and Rumbiza. This was a very clear and insightful presentation. And congratulations again for winning the competition. So, esteemed colleagues, it's now my pleasure to kick off the discussion on today's topic, the future of evaluation as a practice. And please allow me to start with a short introduction on the topic before I hand it over to our very distinguished panel. So the presentation on culturally responsive evaluation raised a number of important issues. For example, the importance of understanding the complexity of locally specific contexts, the importance of taking into account diverse stakeholder views. And this also very much resonates with yesterday's session where Raj Kumar referred to the role of evaluation of giving voice to the voiceless. But at the same time, culturally responsive evaluation, which is a very important paradigm in evaluation, is one of several paradigms if you look at the field of evaluation as a whole. This brings us to a deeper lying issue, which leads us into the topic of today's discussion. As many of you know, despite decades of professionalization and institutionalization of evaluation, there are large differences within the field of evaluation. For example, we have multiple evaluation research paradigms, which differ in terms of their worldviews, their epistemological foundations, the questions that are being asked, and the uses of methods and data. There are different institutional environments in which evaluations are conducted and used. There are differences in the nature of the evaluant, from activities to programs to policies. There are differences in types of evaluation practices, from interim to ex post, to real-time to summative and formative, and so on. And there are also different types of experts involved in designing and conducting evaluations. But at the same time, we also witness a strong movement toward more convergence in the field. And there are clear signs of the growth of evaluation as a profession. And there are signs of this happening. For example, there are now widely accepted standards and competency frameworks and guidance documents on evaluation. There is a growth on evaluation trainings with common core elements. And there's also a growth in certification schemes for evaluation professionals. So these are two phenomena that appear to be at odds with each other. So the big question is, going forward, what is the direction that the field of evaluation will take? And to discuss this question, we have gathered a very distinguished panel of speakers for you. And I would like to immediately start with the first speaker, Elliot, who is the editor of the Journal of Evaluation, the journal Evaluation, and he is also Emeritus Professor of Evaluation Research at Lancaster University. Welcome, Elliot. So, Elliot, to you the first question. Given the context that I just sketched and the fact that evaluation has always struggled with diversity and defining its boundaries, how do you see the field of evaluation moving forward?
I like it when somebody poses a question which is almost impossible to answer, but it's worthwhile trying. Thank you, Jos, for that. I think I want to make 4 main points. The first is about your convergence and difference kind of notion. Second is about the way traditional notions of professionalization are not as convincing now as they used to be. The third is about how much more universal evaluative practice is than what you find in the world of evaluation alone. And fourthly, about how we have to take account of the changing times we live in and how that really shapes the way the future of evaluation is likely to evolve. So if I just start briefly with the convergence and differentiation question, I think you're quite right. Both tendencies exist, and it depends on the setting. We have settings which have different focal problems, objects of evaluation, what US evaluators call evaluands, different roles that evaluators have, different objectives and relationships, like how independent or engaged you are, or how embedded you are, or how objective you are, who you work with, which markets, policy domain, territorial types or institutions, and what your work setting is. So those things cluster together, and they give you clusters of different degrees of coherence. And within particular clusters, there's a lot of coherence, but across the clusters, I think there's a lot less. So I would not expect there to be very great coherence between evaluation of international development and evaluating research and development in parts of Central Europe or the north of Scotland. And I don't see much prospect of convergence across all these settings, although I do see that certain tools and individual methodological toolkits can have some degree of transfer. I think the other thing that you touched on is professionalization, and it's been a big concern of evaluators for a long time, but for me is problematic because it's a rather old-fashioned term. It's one way to regulate an occupational group, but not the only way. Profession implies elites, people with distinctive expertise. It's often quite individualistic. The classical model of a professional is a hospital consultant, or in our field, somebody like an evaluation guru. It makes monopolistic claims to exclusive bodies of knowledge. It has a right for self-defined ethical and practice standards, expects high levels of autonomy and the ability to control entry and exit into the people who are involved in this occupation. Now, this is a very tightly bound model of occupational regulation, to use your language. But at the same time, worldwide, that notion of professionalization is being questioned by managerialism, by market competition and resource scarcity, by democratic challenges to authority, by the prevalence of interdisciplinary knowledge needed to answer most serious problems, and more recently by digitalization and increasingly AI, which bypasses traditional evaluation claims to distinctive knowledge. So I see multidisciplinary evaluation teams as the dominant vehicle for evaluation implementation, rather than individualized evaluation gurus that was characteristic of 20th century evaluation over the future. The third point around practice versus professions, there's a tension between the tight boundaries of the professional model with its monopolistic claims and evaluation practices, which I think we can find everywhere. When I look at people who say they are financial regulators or accident investigators, or people who are inspectors inspecting hospitals or prisons or workplace safety, they all practice evaluation to an extent. They follow what I would call the logic of evaluation, even if they don't use that language. So one future I can see for evaluation is not as a tight, self-contained profession, but as a bridging occupation, a transdiscipline and a trans practice that is able to distill and exchange good practices across different fields, develop and disseminate process and engagement skills, especially across the policy knowledge boundary, facilitate ethical debates and the construction of locally relevant ethical codes, assess the suitability of different methods and techniques in different settings and provide tools for that, and work with interdisciplinary frameworks that enable synthesis of knowledge and findings and help identify follow-up actions. Now, that's a very different model of an occupation than the professional one, but it seems to be a characteristic that is increasingly common among new kinds of professional groups who don't follow the standard rules of the traditional profession. The final thing I want to talk about is what I call changing times. I mean, Western evaluation, which is still fairly dominant despite the efforts of many people, including those who practice and advocate culturally responsive evaluation, it came out of a welfarist technocratic era that claimed at least to believe in social betterment for all. This was essentially a top-down model, even though it was always challenged by more participative approaches, self-evaluation, empowerment evaluation, democratic evaluation, and the rest. So as I see it, culturally responsive evaluation is a new way of asking quite long-established questions. Who sets the evaluation questions? Whose knowledge is valid? Who makes judgments? Who decides on how to act on new knowledge and understandings? And the dominant policy scenario now globally is not one that is rooted around the welfare state and the expansion of services, or even though many in the world still lack basic services and rights. This is mainly because climate, demographic, biodiversity crisis, the dominant policy scenario is already and is likely to be increasingly to be about societal transition and transformation. So we've moved from a state-provided service worldview to a view about the way we need to transform ourselves globally if we're going to face these kind of multiple crises. So this has interesting crossovers for the democratization debate, because transformation agendas rely on collective action, not state action alone, cultural and behavior change and sense-making, all of which are necessarily bottom-up. So for me, one of the lessons and likely directions of evolution of evaluation that are emerging out of culturally responsive evaluation practices, they're not confined to the global south or those who are preoccupied with reconciliation with indigenous people. The kinds of practices talked about by culturally responsive paradigms are likely to become increasingly relevant across all parts of the world and across all areas of evaluative practice, given that we're all facing these common challenges around transformative policy scenarios. Okay, that's my attempt to address your very large-scale question with my equally large-scale answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elliot, for four very thought-provoking points on how you see evaluation as a field of practices going forward. And also very interesting how you make the link with the first presentation and refer and mention the universal importance of culturally responsive thinking, among many other things. So let me now turn to the second panelist who may have a complementary and maybe even an alternative perspective on the future of the field. It is my great pleasure to introduce Asela Kalugampitiya. He is the former president of the Asia Pacific Evaluation Association. He's a well-known evaluation expert and a visiting lecturer of several universities. Welcome, Asela. Asela, you have been a real champion for professionalization and evaluation in the Asia Pacific region in particular. So how do you see the field of evaluation moving forward? Do you see evaluation evolving as a field of diverse practices with some common characteristics? Is evaluation really becoming a profession? I look forward to hearing your views on this. Over to you, Asela.
Thank you, Josh, for the question and the opportunity to participate in this wonderful panel. And also greetings to the massive audience with over 500 people. I'm impressed with the audience as well. First of all, congratulations to IEG for organizing this great conference on future of evaluation. I think the future of evaluation is the future of us. Therefore, this is very relevant and timely. And I think the evaluation field is blessed with several developments, including UN resolutions. I can mention at least three now. 2014 UN resolution on national evaluation capacity development, 2015 UN resolution on Agenda 2030, which emphasizes follow-up and review, and the last year UN resolution on country-led evaluations. All these are important for the evaluation field. At the same time, there are several innovative developments such as global initiative for young and emerging evaluators, which is important for future of evaluation. We saw the winners today from the YE groups, and engaging parliamentarians in use of evaluation becoming more prominent in the global south as more global south countries have strong evaluation systems. So I think these are important milestones in the evaluation field. At the same time, I see both monitoring and evaluation professionals have a strong role to play within and outside the organizations they serve for. Why? Monitoring and evaluation is for reflective thinking, providing independent view on progress and make recommendations to make changes for improvements. Also, it needs to get buy-in from colleagues and from the leadership of the organization. Providing independent reflections and convincing the leadership for transformational changes can be really challenging. Therefore, in addition to sound technical knowledge and experience, monitoring and evaluation professionals need strong leadership qualities, communication skills, management skills, and also ability to be independent within the same community, same group. That's why I say that monitoring and evaluation professionals need to be very strong. Conducting evaluations doesn't mean anything if the environment the evaluator is in does not support use of evaluation results for improvements. Recently, several states failed for the reason that the development interventions were not relevant, not effective, not efficient, not coherent, not sustainable, and obviously not leading to any impact. Therefore, many states have realized that need for producing results by making development more relevant effective, efficient, coherent, sustainable, and impactful by enhancing monitoring and evaluation. For example, my own country recently became a bankrupt country, and the government immediately realized lack of monitoring and evaluation is one of the main reasons for the failure. Then the government issued a circular to all the ministries to evaluate their programs from January this year actually. If we want to transform development in our countries, we need transformative leadership in evaluation field as well. Evaluators need to be proactive, be change makers in development interventions, be advocates for results-oriented interventions, be instrumental in promotion of equitable development. For this, evaluation needs to be a profession, recognized profession. But we are still in the first mile of the long way of the road to making evaluation a profession, in my opinion. What should be there to make evaluation recognized profession? I think we need more academic courses on evaluation to have technically competent evaluators who can produce good quality evaluations. Need competency-based training to enhance and refresh the knowledge of evaluators. Need locally accepted standards, guidelines for evaluations. Need to create more opportunities for emerging evaluators to get experience and work together with matured evaluators. Need support services such as career development opportunities in monitoring and evaluation, mentoring for young professionals, continuous professional development enhancing skills in leadership, communication, and management. Competencies for evaluators should be defined, agreed, and evaluators should be assessed based on them so that they can improve their competencies. In Asia Pacific region, we have developed competency framework for evaluators and invited workers to introduce that at the national levels. All stakeholders have a role in road to make evaluation a profession. I think governments have to bring national evaluation policies or regulations. It also needs to set up institutional arrangements with dedicated cadre for evaluation. That will create job for evaluators and will open more doors for professionalization, in my opinion. And academic institutions can definitely initiate M&E education, particularly targeting young professionals. Development partners can work with the government and other stakeholders to strengthen the evaluation function. Parliaments to institutionalize use of evaluation for decision making so that public funds are wisely utilized. WOPES have a bigger role to mobilize and coordinate all these stakeholders. So WOPES should also take the lead in professionalization of evaluation. I think this will create a path to make the evaluation a strong profession. To specifically answer, yes, it should be a profession, a recognized profession, but we are not there yet. So I think we have a lot to do to make it a recognized profession. Thank you, Jos.
Thank you very much, Asela. And I think you shared some very compelling arguments on how and why evaluation should move towards becoming a recognized profession. I think you gave some very good insights on the key competencies needed, also the need for transformative leadership, and you very much also emphasized the strong link with the function of evaluation in government and fulfilling its role in promoting learning and accountability. So thank you, very interesting points. This brings us to the third panelist, who will provide us more of a demand perspective on this whole discussion. So it's my pleasure to introduce Josephine Watera. She is the Assistant Director of Research Services, and she's the former Head of Monitoring Evaluation Division at the Parliament of Uganda. Welcome, Josephine. So, Josephine, from your perspective as somebody working in government and evaluation, how do you see evaluation evolving? Will it move towards higher levels of specialization in terms of the type of evaluative work that is undertaken and the type of expertise that is required to undertake the work? And going forward, what do you see as the role for professional evaluators versus other experts in this type of work? Over to you, Josephine.
Thank you very much, Joseph, and I congratulate the IEG at 50. Yeah, this topic is really timely. We see today that governments are still facing a number of crises, climate change, disease, wars, and all these require that we have a systematic approach to them. So I can say that there's a high demand for evaluation on the side of the government. We also see that there's a citizenry now that is growing, that it's not just about them voting. They don't just want to sit back and be recipients of services, but the citizen now is growing in its demand, wanting to know what is government doing with their vote, what is government doing with the resources that is available at hand. So we see initiatives that government is trying to put in place. Barazas in Uganda, Imihigos in Rwanda, Imbizos in South Africa, Transgov in Ghana, and all these are intended to initiate community-led kind of evaluation systems and monitoring. And when we see this presentation that we've received today about cultural sensitivity, it is this kind of approaches that the government is looking out that brings the citizens' voices, the people who have not been on the table of decision-making, are now being offered a door and a platform for them to come and be part of discussions and debates, to debate on things that concern them. But what does this mean for evaluators? So evaluators today, we cannot just sit back and watch things happen. The evaluators need to step up and understand the politics and policies that are taking place in the country. Evaluators need to bring their voices in a timely manner. When the debates are happening of budgets, when there's a crisis that is happening on climate change, on issues of disease, of issues of wars and civil strife, it is a time that evaluators need to stand up and bring the evidence when it is needed most. Evaluators also need to take the process of hand-holding. So it's not just about doing an evaluation and leaving it there on the table, but they need now to follow up and offer an additional mile in terms of following up implementation of these recommendations so that it is moved off the shelf and we see that evaluation is changing the lives of the people. There are a lot of resources that are being injected in evaluations. We are operating in a world with minimal, resources, but the little that comes in through evaluation is still not making that impact that is expected. So from the side of government, the demand side, there's need to step out of the closets. We need to close the bridges between the providers and the users of evaluators. There's still a lot that academia is holding back that could make a difference in our world. So besides just having good dissertations, good theses in the academic field, it is time that this comes out and actually transforms the world that we live in today. There's also importance in terms of communication, and my previous panelists have mentioned this. There's a lot that we are missing out in terms of how we package our communication. So there's a lot of scientific expression of our language. As evaluators, we've grown up from the traditional systems that are making us use those heavy scientific words. And so when you come to bring some of this information to the policymakers, they don't understand what you're talking about. So we need to adapt technology and adapt systems and approaches that are communicating evaluation in a simplistic manner, and adopt also the language. We have talked about cultural sensitivity. So we need to adopt the languages that communities can understand and the policymakers in different countries can identify with. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Josephine, and really pointing out very compellingly the role of evaluators as more politically aware actors who really need to focus more on the dissemination and use of evaluative work. So esteemed colleagues, we have three very interesting perspectives on how evaluation is moving forward or should move forward as a field of practice, as a profession. And I would now like to give the floor back to the panelists to give them an opportunity to reflect on what the others have been saying. I noticed that there were a number of disagreements, maybe not disagreements, but differences in view, but there were also a number of commonalities among the three speakers. Elliot, among other things, warned against the exclusivity of evaluation as a profession, which can be dangerous from multiple reasons. Asela very strongly argued for stronger professional pillars for evaluation to become more influential. And Josephine in particular argued for evaluation and field evaluation to become more politically savvy. So I wonder what you have been thinking about each other's interventions, and I would like to give you an opportunity to reflect on that. In addition to that, I also would like to bring in one question from the audience. It's actually a number of questions from the audience which are related to the topic of our introductory presentation and also brought up in some of the conversations. The idea of how can we integrate culturally responsive evaluation into the discussion around professionalization, the discussion around the evolution of the field of evaluation. So please reflect a little bit on that question as well. So let me hand it now over back to the panel, and I would like to start now with Asela. What have you been hearing, and what are your thoughts on what has been said?
Thank you, all the panelists as well as Joss. I think what we have heard from different panelists that in the evaluation field we really need to do a lot in different fronts from the policy level, as evaluation as a practice, as well as professionalization. At the same time, I see the WOPES, evaluation associations, as the custodian of evaluation profession, in my opinion. What is their role? Because now I hear in many countries that for many WOPES, professionalization is challenging, evaluation is challenging. Of course, all these are challenging, but we need to start somewhere, and we need to start operationalizing or initiating things. Then only it will move. And even working with the policymakers, even working with the parliamentarians and the governments, how to advocate the government. Always what I hear is that these are challenging, but we need to start from somewhere and see what are the possible actions we can do. And different actors have a role. So in this sense, I would say that we have to see what is possible and what needs to be done and what is effective, because what is needed in the evaluation field and what is effective, and take action immediately. So I see that WOPES can take the lead in this and steer the process. So I just want to mention this for the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asela. Josephine, what have you been hearing, and what new thoughts has this triggered in your mind? Over to you.
Yeah, so I hear about professionalization, but I also want to give a kind of caution that the evaluators need to know that the people they are working with or working for have some level of knowledge and understanding. They are more into what they're asking for. So sometimes this dominancy of knowledge is something that we need to change as we are talking about the future of evaluation. There's need to think about sharing of knowledge, knowledge transfer, expertise, and bridging, like I mentioned. I agree that the WOPES have a big role and responsibility. We see that many countries have the goodwill to set up evaluation systems, but they don't know how to go by that, how to start. And so WOPES have the big opportunity to step up and come and support the governments to set up evaluation systems, policies, rules, and regulations. Again, there are aspects of ethics that are emerging on a daily basis. So it's expected that in this future that we are walking into, that evaluators will be more cautious and safeguard, the rights, safeguard the responsibilities that have been assigned to their hands, so that they keep safe the people they are collecting information from. And lastly, again, systems of evaluation require a lot of resources. So while we are talking about professionalization and we're talking about the goodwill on the side of government, we still need strong partnerships on board, like the World Bank itself, to support especially these countries that are still, raising up their voices in terms of evaluation, setting up their systems. They're still at infancy stages. We still need a lot of support to set up systems and professionalize the field of evaluation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Great points again on what is needed to move forward in the professionalization of evaluation. Elliot, let me now hand it over to you. I was wondering what you have heard and how this has influenced your thinking on evaluation as a practice and the move towards evaluation as a profession. Over to you, Elliot.
I think the problem for me is we all know what we want, but that doesn't mean that we're going to get it. So I heard a lot of people saying, this is the way I would like the world to be. This is what should happen. The word should was mentioned, used frequently. I don't think that it's possible to say the world must change universally in this way, but I do agree that in particular settings where there is an infrastructure, where there are institutions, it is possible to steer things and reinforce things in this way, which is why I said not universally are we looking at a common convergence, but for example, in the kind of international development community that are represented mainly in this setting, I do see it as possible because the institutional arrangements and the political will tends to be there and tends to reinforce that. I think the issue for me about culturally responsive evaluation is something that I already referred to. I do think that in the policy scenarios that we have now that are becoming dominant, which are about global transformation in the face of crises, I think we're moving away from policy scenarios dominated about the better delivery of services to policy scenarios that are dominated about how do we deal with demographic, biodiversity, climatic crises that are affecting food and survival and fires and all sorts of droughts and everything. In these areas, many of the principles of culturally responsive evaluation are indeed helpful and present. So I don't think there's any question for me that there is a crossover, as was already suggested in the web chat. I think the last point that was made, I think maybe by Josephine, I'm not sure, was about knowledge transfer. Was it you, Josephine, who mentioned that, or was it someone else?
Yes, me.
Okay. And I think what is interesting about the way evaluation is evolving in the Northern Hemisphere around issues to do with transformation and the green agenda and how we deal with crises is that there's a much more intensive focus on engagement with stakeholders using different kinds of tools and methodologies. So you were implying, Josephine, maybe that we need to perhaps almost simplify things so that we can communicate well with citizens. Another view you might take is that we have to create frameworks in which citizens can become experts. And for example, the concept of citizen science is absolutely central to many community-based initiatives in the Northern Hemisphere. The idea of people going away in very practical terms for a weekend conference where they spend 3 days with experts and with other citizens from a community or a region discussing something, so that by the end of that weekend, they really understand in depth what the experts are saying and are able to be critical of those inputs when they want to be. So I think notions of policy labs, where you have a participatory approach to how you test out new policies, citizens' assemblies, participatory conferences, ways of being much more serious about giving people information other than simply saying, well, we've issued a memorandum and it's in the local newspaper, and if people want to read it, they can. Or alternatively saying, let's make things very simple so that everybody can understand it. Because actually, many of the problems we face at a policy level are not that simple. So whether there is a possibility of reconciling what I was arguing, Josephine, and what you're arguing, by saying, how do we invest more in communication with stakeholders in order to help them acquire the expertise that allows them to challenge experts more effectively? That would be my hope as a result of what may be a disagreement between us, or maybe just coming at it from a different angle.
Thank you very much, Elliot. And thank you very much, esteemed colleagues. I will not try to summarize the very interesting interventions, but one point I would like to make. It seems that the diversity versus convergence debate is not something that we can resolve. And in a way, it's also an empirical issue. We will see how it evolves. But I think some very good points have been made that argue that for evaluation should become a profession, because we need to have a strong advocacy voice in government. We need to, and also in other organizations, we need to be able to bring voices of citizens. We need to be able to bring evidence into policy, and for that we need strong professional foundations. But on the other hand, we also need to recognize that diversity is very important. We need a lot of different competencies, specialized skills in evaluative practice, and there are so many different evaluative practices. So let's also embrace diversity in the field. But this is something that will surely will be food for a lot more debate in the future. I would like to give the panelists 30 seconds each to very briefly share their guidance to young emerging evaluators. We started with a very brilliant presentation by our colleagues on culturally responsive evaluation. Is there any guidance that you could give to colleagues who are entering the field of evaluation that they can take home and ponder about? So very quickly around the table, any advice that you can give? Josephine?
I would say passion and persistence, the two P's. The field is diverse. There's a lot to learn. So let them keep going. And they're welcome on board.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Josephine. Elliot? Very, very concise, please. You are muted. You are muted. You are muted, Elliot. You have to unmute.
I'm very loath to advise anybody who is doing something very well how they should do something better. But within that constraint, I do think that it would be useful to look at other paradigms for participatory and democratic evaluation and not regard them, we're always reinventing the wheel. I think there are some very good lessons to be learned from what is sometimes called democratic, sometimes participatory, sometimes empowerment-based evaluation, all of which have, I don't say swallow any of these things whole without being critical, but look at that as well, because there are parallel ideas that are highly relevant to culturally responsive evaluation.
Thank you, Elliot. Asela, the last word to you.
Very quickly, I want to say that all the young evaluators nowadays are very lucky compared to my time when I was young. because they have all the means, the training, more than the past, the opportunities, the technology and mentoring programs and support and Young and Emerging Evaluators program. So I would say take the benefit of all this, take the opportunity and learn from this, all these, opportunities, and yes, have, career development in evaluation and become expert evaluators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asela. All right, esteemed colleagues, we have come to the end of this session. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let me thank our brilliant presenters at the beginning of the session on culturally responsive evaluation. Thank you very much to our distinguished panel, and thank you very much to you, audience, for joining and participating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.